Welcome to Fontribute, where we talk about fonts and their attributes. Fontribute. And Erin always joined me again. It's always a pleasure. Erin, great to have you on the call.
Hi, that's Thomas, by the way.
I know. I just presume after these many weeks of doing it, people know who's saying. I'm Thomas Jockin. And we have Kyle Wayne Benson on the call with us. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Howdy, glad to be here.
Yes. So, Erin, what are we talking about today?
Oh, buddy, you're in for a treat. We have delicious Gooper typeface that Kyle
Very appropriate name.
has designed. Oh gosh, love it. So as everyone can see, it's chunky, crazy, kind of 1920s Cooper sort of inspired typeface, and I had the delightful challenge of coming up with something to compare it with. So I decided to rustle through my old free fonts folder from the college days. I found this hilarious 1920s Cooper sort of inspired typeface called Ragg Mopp NF by Nix Fonts. So we're going to have some funny comparisons, but they're both full of character, and I don't know. I think this is going to be great. So Kyle, do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of your background, about how you came up with this and who you are, and tell us about Very Cool Studio?
Sure. Man, Gooper is such a maybe obvious story. I think a few years ago, I saw a lettering artist who was doing something that they called Cooper Jr. And it just meant like Cooper, but a little crazy. And as a type designer, you get super bored with the 4-year project that you're working on. And I was working on a logo that was kind of Cooperish and ended up with this tiny little alphabet in that vein. And I actually have never designed with Cooper. I have designed with Cooper Nouveau, the House Industries Cooper typeface. So I don't have that much familiarity with it, and I haven't looked that closely. So I was excited to do this comparison because it's a genre that is entirely based on essentially one cut of one typeface, and it's kind of like the king of that space. And it's just fun the way that it's dominated that visual world, unlike so many other typefaces that kind of sit in a genre block. This one kind of is its own genre block. Yeah, so Very Cool is a type foundry that I run. I don't release very often because I have a day job. Making fonts is just my night hobby. And fonts take so long. Gooper is still pretty in its early days. In fact, even just the one that you've pulled up is different than the one that I have. It's the nature of type, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. I'm glad you're still working on it. And also, I know you had a really fantastic italic happening too. Unfortunately, we can't show it all, but oh, I can't wait to see what happens with this.
All right, let's get started.
Yeah. Woo.
Okay. Oh boy. All right, Erin. I feel like you feel motivated to speak, so I'll let you go first.
Oh, I'm so excited. Oh, there's nothing like a tasty globby font like this. That's, it's so cool. I love how globs, Gooper, we can talk about that. So as everyone can see, all of the curves are kind of very all the serifs are blobbing out here. We've got very blobby, parts everywhere. It's very fun, very full of character. Very thick. If we're going to look at the, both of these typefaces have, kind of the low contrast, definitely thing happening. I would say Ragg Mopp, because of these, you're going to see a lot of these curved terminals, or I mean, what is that even called? Would that be a serif?
Yeah, they're serifs.
I mean, it's like at this point, it's a little boat. It's a little boat shoe, but
like
you're going to see that across. It's kind of, I mean, the feeling I got from Ragg Mopp is it's a little bit closer to kind of like what would that be, like those pen 1920s like pen writing, whatever, yeah, that speedball sort of thing. Yes, speedball, those pens, that sort of influence, whereas Gooper feels a little bit more like type-y to me. I don't know. You know, Thomas, you jump in. I'm being too abstract.
No, it's all good. I mean, obviously, I think they're very structurally similar, right? Yeah, let me get my drawing pen going. Cool. Right. Basically, they're kind of these rounded terminals decisions, right? The radius are different, though, right? If I undo that here. Notice kind of the arch here versus this. It's almost like it's meant to be a square, right? And it's been rounded out, abstracted out to a round blob shape. But the curve radiuses are different between the two. You can see that on the serifs on the bottom. We can also notice the lack of a kind of intentional joint in the Ragg Mopp approach versus Kyle's approach, where this is a very almost like separation, right, in the joints area of over from the shoulder over into the flag serif down. So we can see that distinction. Let me clear my drawings. Cool. We can also see, I want to point out I really appreciate is this nice momentum in the counter. Like notice the curve is moving a kind of radius this way and then kind of more abruptly ends on the right side. I think that really stands out versus the kind of more equivalent approach on the momentum curve on the top counter and just straight down on both sides for Ragg Mopp. I'm curious how that's going to have an effect with the other letters and in the setting of words overall. And lastly, something that caught my attention. So there seems to be equivalent side bearing decisions, right, left and right on Ragg Mopp with obvious consequences that come up with that. If you notice the white space relationships left and right. Gooper has an interesting decision where I'm seeing it's tighter on the right side than the left. I have seen that in other cases, other designs. So I'm curious. I'm going to be just watching that and invite everybody else to see how does that spacing decision affect typesetting down the road. So that's what I'm seeing so far.
Nice observations. Yeah, one more thing before we move. Yeah, like you said, that is interesting that you noted that. You know, we've got like that more. It almost feels more mechanical and computer influenced or something. The drawing of Ragg Mopp versus Gooper feels a lot more soft or something in how everything is handled. So that's going to be interesting. The kind of dichotomy of the organic shapes versus kind of mechanical influences. Cool. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, one last note. Just want to take notice. Yeah. Notice the significant difference in weights between the flag serif and the feet serif. Just want to point that out in Gooper. I'm curious how that's going to pan out in other designs. So let's go.
Woo!
Now that's fascinating. Okay, that's actually very fascinating. So, because I know the model of Gooper Black, you know, this definitely speaks to that vocabulary. You know, kind of how the radius is handled. There's a very strong axis pulled into this thing. So this follows exactly what I would expect for this kind of Gooper Black inspired design. It's interesting in Gooper, notice the much more square profile overall, right? Especially in the counter, you know, actually in both, but the counter especially, I can see this really strong, more squared profile in the curves. Yet it's still honoring that, you know, strong axis energy. Fascinating. It's very fascinating. I usually don't see this kind of more squared curve profile with a slanted axis imposed inside the counter, especially. That's really fascinating from my perspective.
This is a good place of pointing out. I really struggle with subtlety, and you know, when you're first getting started with a design, you might go back and forth in extremes with curve tension, and I always tend to be biased toward very, very tense curves. And I actually like in Ragg Mopp how relaxed it is. It's almost like a deflated balloon.
Yeah.
Gives it kind of a pointed effect.
Yeah, that's funny. I like how, I mean, this is going to be interesting when we see the text settings, that having the more rectangular form, it's obviously going to have a different fit with the rest of it. And I know that Gooper is kind of like closely fit, like everything's kind of snuggling together. And I think it's with having serif overhangs like that and stuff, it gives you, I think having a less round shape gives you a greater opportunity to have, like, you know, close fitting, kind of more intentional looking negative spaces and stuff that seem the same rhythm. But I'm getting ahead of myself and imagining things that I'm not even talking about. So
well, that's okay. That's part of that. This is part of the experience. We're gonna hypothesize from our observations, and we see if they pan out or not.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
I think it's important to note we can see here a very dramatic contrast shift between the two as well. Just take note of that. It's something we'll be observing, probably watching for later on as we get to different settings.
Let's hop along.
Nice. You want to jump first, Erin?
Fun. Sure. Yeah. I think what we remember from that N, some of the same themes of the Ragg Mopp, I'm going to start there, were repeated, like that. We've got that straight angle upward here, curvy bottom, very straight angle. It's kind of our straight stem here. It's interesting to see it in comparison to Gooper. I love when designers play with the whole idea of having a straight stem here, and he actually added the tapering in effect here, which I mean, I just love the negative space that creates. And again, we've got that sort of angled axis like we were talking about, and slightly more rectangular form overall, although this is a little bit more round than we saw in the O. And then also noticing the joins, like here it gets a bit thinner. We have a thicker join over here, and this angle, or the circular, the bowl kind of is a little bit more circular and has more negative space here than, whereas this part of the bowl is going, the shoulder of it is going up in the corner there. So kind of just some differences, formal differences. I don't know if you want to talk more about any of that, Thomas.
Yeah, well, definitely one thing to note is how this flag serif is handled. It's a very fascinating form, right? It's trying to it literally like hooks into the form, like almost like I draw a skeleton like that. It's really fascinating. It's like take the organic energy and just it's tuck it into its most extreme possibility, right? In fact, I actually almost feel like this is a heavier zone than this area over here, right? So it's fascinating. Okay, and then one thing to note, again, it's kind of like Ragg Mopp. It says Ragg Mopp kind of gets, it's like they didn't really conclude how the hell they're going to handle joints because it's got to just slam it in there, right? Gooper was very intentional, and as we saw in the end, we see the same approach of a joint, right? It's kind of like ink trappy, almost abstracted out form. It's almost like the form is like this, right? And it happens. It's like by ink spread, the strokes combine together, right? Especially down this joint over here. So another thing I noticed there's a axis here, but it's nowhere near as strong as the O, right? Notice Ragg Mopp, the axis shifts. I think that's occurring. I feel like this is different from the O. I can't verify. Kyle, you can let me know if I'm right or wrong on that point, but just want to take note between the two. At least let's put it this way: the variance of shift of axis in the rounds is very extreme in Ragg Mopp. In Gooper, I think it's not as extreme. At least that's my impression so far.
Yeah. So the typeface that I did just before Gooper, or the one that I released, was really modular, and type design, especially a lot of the kind of time-saving things, tend to be biased towards modularity and toward how interpolatable a form is. And Gooper for me was definitely trying to not think about interpolation. Letter forms that I thought looked correct at all costs. And so some of those like little ink traps and stuff were definitely a stretch in my ability to create something modular that still complemented but was different. So there are distinct differences, sometimes even in like the stress angle, like you're noticing with the D and the O, where I intentionally tried not to just copy and paste paths to see if there was kind of a warmth or like a difference that was subtle enough that it just felt its own, like it felt like its own letter.
Yeah. Cool.
That is great.
The A. Oh, that's fun.
How could I not include the Ragg Mopp A as a comparison?
I know. I mean, yeah. I'm just gonna markate these and let everybody see that. Very dramatically different proportions. This will definitely stand out in text. I'm very curious. Like it's fast. Okay, so I'll leave it to that. Really, let's be critical though. So some other point. Let's just focused. Yeah, in general, I'm definitely getting this sense of like it's cool. I can actually feel this like arching up in the bowl, on the top of the A. Like notice how it arches up and then kind of comes down a little bit and then comes back in again. I could see Kyle's point about trying to not worry about interpolation and letting curves just kind of organically come up as they need to, I think it does give a lot of warmth and a nice bubble energy, right, to this area of the A. I actually quite enjoy that. Likewise, I could see it's kind of interesting enough. Like this form is kind of like teardrop shape. I could see a little bit of energy in that in Gooper, with less of a slant energy in that counter right over here. So those are points I'm seeing. It is interesting also notice the nature of contrast, right? Notice how much dramatically thinner these areas are versus how this terminal area is handled. Which makes sense because, well, shit's got to go somewhere. So you got to make priorities of what gets the most weight and what gets reduced. So you can prioritize the main areas of discussion. But so those are points I'm seeing so far. Erin, I'll let you keep going on with Magarop if you'd like to go in with that.
Oh yeah, I just want to note one more thing. I mean, I like the stability of your Gooper A. I mean, I like it. Just feels so solid and happy, just sitting there. Like, well, unlike this guy, who feels very lopsided. But I again love how there is like a slight bit of tapering in, and how that kind of plays with all the other round bits. I think you made some really cool decisions there. Ragg Mopp, this is the thing. I don't know enough about like the popular commercial hand, the writing style of the time. I don't know. This must have been some sort of historical, like, in advertising. They must have done something like this. Otherwise, where would this have come from? But it is quite interesting to see the very strange proportions of Ragg Mopp. I mean, and the implications. You don't see this too often. Like, how is this going to affect that's an R somehow. I was like,
Nice.
affect like kerning, like all those spacing decisions. It's going to be very interesting to see. And also, looking at these up close, this is quite an interesting little counter shape. That is kind of fun. This is a nice opportunity for us to look at kind of like curve quality and stuff. And I definitely can tell the drawing, like there's some, we didn't mention in some of the other letters, but I think in Ragg Mopp, there are some opportunities for the curves to have been handled a little bit better. There's some like pointy parts of some of the curves that could have been smoothed out a little, which I don't think look intentional. But we just thought we might as well talk about that sort of thing. Anyway, I don't know. Should we move on to the next letter, or is there anything else you want to?
Well, Kyle, anything you want to add, Kyle?
I feel like this one is an interesting break because it actually feels like there's like an intentional decision to make ink trap here that wasn't in the other characters.
You're right. Yeah, the B totally, or the D, sorry, had that. Yeah, just like
it's gonna burp. It's gonna plop it in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Good observation. Ooh.
Very cool.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow.
Both of these are phenomenally interesting. Oh my God.
Erin,
no, Tom.
You want me to go? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I saw this in the typesetting of Hamburger Font Set. I am going to be so curious how this pans out this year because that is extreme to the highest degree. It's like a ponytail. It's like here's a head, right? Here's a face, and then here's the ponytail on it. It's fascinating. If it was 21st century, it would be man bun maybe. Who knows? Anyways, so that's just super fascinating. Yeah, I know. I agree. I've seen this in advertising. It's just a fascinating form, right? This is like basically a figure 8, just so the really wide bottom, and it's like it's like a person scared, right?
Yeah.
It reminds me of that sign painter G that you see all the time with like a sign painter's sans serif.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's very influenced by that sort of. Yeah, all that commercial stuff, and you'll notice later on also this sort of upright approach is taken with the tittles as well, so it's quite very dramatic. So we've got two very eye-catching elements. This one obviously is going to affect, if this is the X height, it's going to be affecting the visual texture that way. This with your Gooper G, I mean, usually you don't see a G with such an overhang there with kind of, I mean, this might be more common to have the bottom half of a double story G like go out a little bit for to the right side, but to have this much of an overhang is going to be interesting to see how that interacts with spacing. So did you have a lot of trouble like when you were spacing the typeface? Like how do you how do you make this all work together? Was that really difficult? Like, do I overlap it with the next letter? Do I butt it up against? Like, what was
I
your...
still feel like it doesn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, Gooper has been an interesting challenge because even though I've been spacing as I draw, there are a lot of times where it's just really subtle, like not bad spacing, but really subtle bad spacing is kind of good, like a little bit of overlap that is kind of added to.
Yeah.
It's just so hard to when you want to make type that doesn't look like type. Such a hard thing to explain. So this is definitely a case where every ear that I drew on this G was more of a spacing problem than a solution, and yeah, just trying to fill that space because I mean you pointed it out in the O. A lot of the characters, I'm trying to create a consistent rhythm through just kind of filling the box, just getting as tense as possible with every letter. And yeah, this one I still feel like isn't exactly there, but that's the idea.
Yeah. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up, Kyle, because I could actually feel some ambiguity about the curve profiles in this section, right? I'm sensing a little less of the intentionality I saw in the other round to joint systems, right? It doesn't have that same tension, especially when I compare that to inside the counter, right?
Yeah.
Inside. So I think I definitely can sense some of the challenges of this form. I could definitely see that in the top section. The bottom section, I feel like actually is very confident, right? I can actually feel a lot of confidence. I see some very nice expansion up here in the zone over here. It's clear what it's doing, and this kind of idea, like the broken stroke idea, like these kind of ink trappy effects of expanding ink. I feel this bottom section is more resolved and clear in your mind, you're thinking, than this top section so far.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, yeah, I'm gonna have to see this look closer in the text. But I mean, I get what you're saying. I really think that people are shying away from letters overlapping when I think it's a very helpful or a natural feeling thing. I totally agree with you on that. Especially like, Thomas knows my pet peeve of when people make unnecessary ligatures that like just disrupt everything. Like, you can let things overlap if it looks good. Why make a crazy form that draws attention to itself? But I think, yeah, I mean, obviously this might be a little bit too much of an overstretch or something. And I agree. Like, I feel like this in particular, that section kind of isn't making as much sense. Or I don't know, there's something about to me
that whole
it's actually
section.
that side maybe rather than even that side. But I don't know. But I mean, I love it in and of itself, and I hope that we can figure out like what will make this work, because it would be a shame to lose this really distinctive G. I mean, obviously this is like the star of the show. It really draws attention to itself. And then just because I'm abnormally attracted to the Ragg Mopp font, like I shouldn't be, but I do want to criticize. Like, it feels so sterile compared to the Gooper G. Like how very circular round these are. These almost feel like stretched. Like, it doesn't feel like it was naturally drawn at all. It feels like something cut and pasted together, which is too bad, because if someone made this at a different drawing quality, I would love that typeface. Anyway, okay.
Moving on.
Next one.
Yeah.
Yay. Oh, good.
Wow.
Yeah, I wanted to include this because I know you spent on both the Y and the J, you introduced this interesting kind of like, I mean, it almost looks like it's supposed to represent like an overlapping form or something, and that's like got an interesting yin yang thing going on there. So, Thomas, what are your reactions? Tell us what you think.
I think both of these have yeah, a lot of interesting things going on. I mean, one is, yeah, that tittle as a I mean, you could argue it's an acute, or well, actually you can't, because it's not angled in either way. But wild. That's all I'll say on that note. It definitely earned its Dafont reputation.
Oh,
right? You can't convince me. No, I'm not convinced
like
at all.
I'm gonna make a typeface like this. I'm gonna do it.
Go ahead, man. I don't. I'm not sold in any way on that move.
Okay.
Right. So it's interesting. I feel like this is like an idea that is not resolved. It's basically, I like where it's going. This like thinking of emphasizing what's the most important part of a J, right? But I definitely feel like it's not resolved yet. I think the biggest issue is how to deal with the tapering, right?
This is a common problem that I have with the letter J, because you can ignore it for a really long time. The lowercase j isn't really something that gets used very much in English anyway.
Right.
So even seeing it here, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. This is uncomfortable.
Well, I mean, I really like how you did this part for sure. To me, you know, when I was setting the slides, I mean, the Y and the J, I mean, it's so difficult when you have such a blobby typeface like this. How do you continue the blob theme down there without it looking extremely heavy and drawing too much attention? I mean, I know it's really difficult. I wonder if it's just that the cut is like a little too deep or something, or maybe it's just because there's too much contrast down there. Like this gets too thin, or I don't know. Thomas, what was your objection? Like, what do you think? I don't.
It just feels unnatural. There's just something about this movement that doesn't vibe. It's almost like if I was going to use the grammar of the other forms, I don't know. Like my first instinct. Well, I have two. One is, does it need to arch in this much? Right? Does it need to go a full curve over? Right? Versus stopping here, for example. There's that question. But let's presume that this what you wanted to keep this full arching and curving in effect. You know, maybe my first instinct would be maybe curve it. Basically, do what kind of you did with the D or the D or other ascenders, where you kind of have a taper in, right, and it kind of juts out on the side. That causes spacing issues and a whole shit show of events. But yeah, just something about this decision. It's not fully resolved yet, at least in my mind so far.
I think we need to see it in text before we make any comments. I don't know, because I totally, to seeing the whole thing together, I totally get what you're trying, Kyle, and I think it like kind of made sense. But I don't know. Maybe we'll rest on this for a moment. I think I have one more up close slide that might be worth looking at.
Got it. Just one last up before we jump.
Oh, sure.
I do want to comment that I'm a little surprised with the title decision in Gooper, considering the kind of strong square kind of squircle effect that you're focusing on. Yeah, that square circle thing.
Squircle. That's cute.
Yes. Yes. That's a technical term. It is.
You're saying you think it's too round or
something. I can't articulate exactly, but something up with these curve profiles. It's not, I think it could be a little more intentional.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree. I got to look at it in context.
Okay.
I don't know. Thank you for your comment, Thomas.
Anytime. Well, this is fun.
Yeah, here's where they really deviate. I would say angled characters in Ragg Mopp are all very well. What am I saying? They've had plenty of deviations, but the angled characters of Ragg Mopp, as everyone can see, are there's kind of more of a pointiness to it, whereas Gooper you've decided to have that very flat segment to continue. I assume to continue with that theme of the squircle that we've been talking about. So it creates a really different sort of feel, and it allows Gooper to feel a lot fatter and fill up that space a lot more. And as people can now notice, there is a lot more contrast added to the W in order to fit everything in that space.
Especially on that one right there, right? This one versus this one.
Sure. Yeah, Thomas, go ahead and talk about it a bit.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I feel like this is a crown, right? Like here's the king of letters. Anyways, yeah, it's a very interesting decision. It's kind of like horizontalness emphasized. This is actually part of the reason why I like things like the J and the D. Notice on the D flag serif on that top, right, on the ascender, it is actually heavier than the vertical stroke of the stem in that D. And I feel a similar kind of playing with horizontality of the weight playing through. So I think I'm curious how this all comes together. I actually think it's a wise move to make this form, considering his kind of emphasis on these square curve profiles and energy about that. So I'm curious how this is going to work out.
I do feel, though, I think that these particular moments, they don't feel quite as, what was the word, squircle-ish as like some of the other blobs you've been using. Maybe it's because, I don't know if it's just because it's so continuous, whereas a lot of your other shapes, there was a little bit more curviness.
That's true.
I think if I were you, you might want to try adding a little bit more unevenness somewhere in the diagonal forms. It feels a little too regular, I think.
Once you open the Pandora's box of having really curvaceous letter forms, it's so hard to dial that in.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm constantly going back and forth between how curvy it should be.
Gosh, I'm trying to think if there's like what else. Oh gosh, I could probably spend half an hour thinking about like how could you change this. Oh, this
Well,
is
let's
a
go see
hard
it in
one.
words. I propose we
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, let's do that. Sure. Well, we've got a V in here anyway in the
Yeah.
lineup. So this is kind of cool because you do get to see the oh man, I love it. I mean, I love the bouncy kind of rhythm you have with a lot of these forms, and you do now in this view we do get to see some of the other details like the R was also really interesting in how bulbous it gets on the right side, which is fun, and we have some little spurs on the F and the S as well. So that's another kind of element that was introduced. And here again, so then that flat. I think, yeah, to me, if I were just to look at this straight up, I would say the T looks a little heavy, I think. That's one thing I'm feeling. I don't know if you
for
get
sure.
that.
Yeah, I saw the
But
same thing too.
yeah. And again, I'll let Thomas talk about that, whether he thinks that's working or not. I mean, honestly, I think it can work if you allow the next character to overlap it. But I think if it's spaced as such, it doesn't really work, in my opinion. But
Yeah.
that's one thing. And then, yeah, again, I think there's something about the V. Maybe even if you just make it maybe it just needs a little bit more of an angle and a little bit pointer, and
Yeah.
if it had a little rounder. That's my gut feeling. But Thomas, do you have any gut reactions?
Well, definitely just the fit is so radically different, right? It's like in terms of how it fits together, Gooper versus Ragg,
Oh,
Mopp
sure.
below, just the texture and feeling about it is just radically different between the two. Also, just the feeling, right? Like this, I feel like I'm eating like a cheeseburger, a really greasy cheeseburger,
Yeah.
right? And it's like and it's like it's in a wrapper, and the wrapper text is expanding from the oils and everything. So these are all good things. I'm not saying these are bad adjectives. It's just it's definitely it has so much character and it's with the attention on this kind of expansion blobbiness effect. I think with kind of like the knowledge of its of a cheekiness, especially like that R move, like that's fun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I'm seeing a very clear voice in the project. I definitely feel like it's the tension points really when it comes up to non-rounds, how it will handle itself, right? The S terminals, the F I'm a little stronger on. I feel like it's more confident in its decision, but compared like how this flag serif is handled versus like the S terminal, especially like those two, I feel like show, and then actually let's contrast those two how these serifs are handled. There's still some tension I'm seeing in the curves when they were meant to be kind of these straight shapes, and how they're going to, as Kyle said, he's negotiating that. But overall, just again, that kind of greasy cheeseburger aesthetic, compare that to, this feels way more just mechanical, but yet weird moments of unbalance that don't work.
Yeah, definitely. Ragg Mopp's texture. Yeah, like this is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fun.
The blob, which is funny. But yeah, some of these characters look a lot more like this looks a lot more unnatural, and that weight in the anyway, but everyone can see that. I do like some moments, the S in this one I like a lot. I think, if I were to go back one more time for the Gooper, I mean, I love how some of these, and I still love that B right there. I love how a lot of that's working. There might, if I had to change anything in addition, like I think maybe it is a little bit too complicated in some of these moments of the S and the F. Like maybe that, I don't know how I feel about that. And the B, those are the only tiny moments, which not to say that they can't happen, but there's some. It's so hard to make something like an S. There's just so much going on in a small amount of space, so many turns, twists and turns. I think if I had a wish list, I would wish that this was maybe a little more streamlined, smooth. It might be a little, in my opinion.
It's almost like it's trying too hard to be clear. And the F and the S show the tension that I've had with terminals in general, like those serif terminals that are on curved shapes. And the F, I've probably, this has gone through more iterations than anything else. There isn't very much room to express contrast. And so contrast has to be demonstrated in really subtle ways, which in part, as has been mentioned, has created like very little contrast, very subtle contrast in order to keep it still very bold, very black feeling. But yeah, details definitely have to get sacrificed.
I wonder if I'm trying to remember what the Cooper Black F looks like. I keep thinking that maybe it was a simplified like that, and there wasn't any sort of dingle hopper on it. And I'm wondering if
Dingle
maybe
hopper.
that would help smooth it over a little bit, even if you just removed it a little bit. Yeah, maybe if you, I don't know. That's my wish list. Maybe I should pay you to make a custom version of it or something. That's the solution, Erin. Anyway.
Nice.
So should we move to the next slide? Okay, cool.
Oh, you.
So a little bit of punctuation and numerals here, because I know this is in progress and there haven't been any accented characters or anything, but we've got a little bit to look at. But yeah, so that thing I was just commenting on in the S and the F, those little spurs, those definitely those showed up on the letters and or the numbers in various spots, which are actually quite fun, I would say. I think this touching is like too much, I think.
Yeah.
I would change that if I were you. And then what else would I say? Well, we got to see this in context. But I'm kind of thinking, since this is a display typeface and it's probably going to be used a large size, I don't know if this needs to be quite so large, the comma. I think maybe it could, at least this could be a little shorter or something, maybe. Do you have any comments, Thomas?
Yeah. Well, definitely, again, the main theme is kind of like rounded straight system. You know, like before stands out to me. I love that form. It does feel radically different in terms of, especially like this, how this crossbar is handled. I really enjoy that dip down, right? That bring back up. I really like that. It just, but that it feels that curve momentum is so different from everything else I've seen, right? And it's so that's standing out to me in terms of that, just that thinking about that. So that's still, I sense that tension going through, and likewise for things like the capital O in this case, right? There's something about this axis and how the squares are handled in the capital form that I don't feel are fully resolved yet, right? Maybe I think maybe perhaps it's just too strong of an axis in that capital O. Maybe that's part of the issue. I'm not exactly sure, but that just from what I saw from there. On the punctuation, I'm curious how it's going to look in text. I almost feel like this might be too light, that part. We'll see. Just because again, the emphasis on heaviness on the whole project gives me that inclination. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And
yeah, actually, I want to jump in real quick. Now that we were looking at the O, I wasn't even looking at it, but I think there's some like it looks a little bit more lumpy and unresolved, I think, than a lot of your other letters. So I think there's something like it feels a little flatter on the counter there, and like it feels like it's jutting out a little bit. I think that one might need to be just tightened up overall with some of the shapes. But obviously, I can tell you've been working so hard on the lowercase that it's hard to kind of resolve the uppercase, which it doesn't offer as many opportunities for wackiness usually. But also, I should have done a slide that had a comparison of the weight, I think, of both of these. I have some examples in our next slide, but sometimes the like I know the lower cases looks very dark and dense, and I'm wondering if the uppercase might feel a little, there's like a lot more contrast, I think, happening. There might be. Anyway, that's something we can look at in a minute.
yeah.
Sorry.
Is there cap settings?
You know what? I think we have, let's see what's on our next slide. Oh, you know what? We do have some more capitals. We'll at least get some of that. Should we?
All right, cool. Well, here I am. Next slide.
Yeah, let's jump ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so nice. Okay, never mind. Yeah. Take it back. Oh, I love it. Ooh. Gosh, it looks so good. It looks so good together. I forgot how nice this looked.
I feel like this is like for an ad for like Jack in the Box from the 1970s. It definitely has like Cooper. I feel the Cooper blackness, right? That kind of like aesthetic of that come through. But I'm actually, I think overall it's a really fun texture, right? And that definitely, that's the overall impression I'm getting, like initially, right?
Oh, I love it. I mean, I love the moments where you do allow like the touching and stuff to occur. It does make it feel like hand lettered or something like that. I love it. And even like, heck, I know Thomas and we often try to like even out or try to give advice where we're like, let's even out all of the kinks and things that make the letters look different. But the fact that the C is a little darker and wider, I actually really like it. I don't know. Maybe it's good to keep some of these inconsistencies in here. Really like how that works. It definitely, yeah. What do you think about so there's the Y in context with the cutout and the J. What do you think, Thomas, now that you see it at this size?
I think the Y is working. I will allow it. I think it's a legal move. The J.
Yeah, I'm less and less sold on the J as we go through these. The thing is, I just have ignored it. It's been
yeah.
not high on my priority list.
Yeah. I do want to point out something just overall. Kyle, you said before the tension of making type that's not type, and you said it was a little difficult to articulate what that meant. My impression, what you meant by that, I'm seeing it here, is there's a kind of warmth and a kind of like consistency that works together, even though the parts are irregular, right? That's I'm getting that feeling. Just compare that to Ragg Mopp. Like here, I mean, first of all, there's weight issues. I can see clearly in the capitals or lowercase, right? Just watch. That stands out really clearly. But like, it tries to pull off this various of width situation and wacky forms, and it just comes off as not effective. Like it just doesn't. I don't find it's convincing in its argument, like what it's trying to say in its forms. Versus Gooper, even though there are still technical issues and conflicts and tensions to resolve, I think it just has a much better footing to be convincing about its proposition, what it's trying to say with this design, right? With the variance of widths, for example, and this whole like Gooper effects and just like disjointedness effect and things like the Y, for example, or the V's in this case.
Man, I think I want to take back what I said about the S spurs. I actually they're kind of awesome. Maybe I'll retract that as well. Oh, it's good. But I do think, looking at this in context, I still do think that the flat bottoms are kind of sticking out to me. I really like. I like in the middle of the N. What letter is that, Erin? M. It's like less. It seems almost a little more round and kind of bouncier. I think maybe these could benefit from like a little bit more roundness in the bottom or pointy. I don't know. It might be worth a try. I'm not sure. But also, go ahead.
To pay a compliment to Ragg Mopp, I really do think the kind of triangular M's and W's work very well over there.
Yeah, I like it too.
Yeah.
I bias in my V's and W's towards fixing with spacing and trying to just fill out that box as much as possible. But seeing it here in Ragg Mopp, I think I could learn a lesson about letting the V be its true triangle.
You are so kind, Kyle. That is so awesome. But yeah, you know what? I like what you're saying. I like the word TV. I'm like, that's actually kind of cool. This is quite tasty. I mean, I know we were talking about we're not used to seeing such drastic differences in weight between a lowercase and an uppercase, but like there's something quite cute and fun about those uppercase letters, how they, and the foxes. That's cute. Anyway, wait, one more thing before we move on. Do we seeing kind of the contrast differences? So like the J is a lot more low contrast, I would say, and the T as well than like the M. And what do you think of that, Thomas, since we're critiquing? Do you think that's totally cool? Or
I mean, I feel like you kind of have to do that to get the forms to work out, right?
Yeah.
Perhaps there are things like, I think the M might be too high contrast, right? In that first stem thinness. Let's compare that to the W, for example. I think it's the right solution. I think it might be just the degree might be not in sync in some cases.
Yeah. I just want to say, I think my reaction is that maybe the difference in contrast between some of these letters looks a little too great. Like I kind of wish there was a middle ground where they all sat a little bit more closely, like TV next to each other. They kind of, to me, feel ever so slightly not in tune. But that's just a minor thing. So I don't know. We do have one more slide if you want to look at some things even larger.
Before we move on, I just want to make a comment. The might, I'm not sold on that ear.
Oh, the G.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's another opportunity gain. We've got that zinger. But I don't know. Yeah, that's hard because it's like you can kern it next to an E or a round shape. But if it's going next to something like that with the serif, you can't really get much closer without losing the clarity, can you? That might be too hard. Shoot.
I feel like there's got to be a way to get that ear to work, like just another form of the ear to be more successful.
You think maybe just like not as like long, so it looks more like a
like that kind of thing,
bulbous thing instead of going down so long.
It depends. It depends what Kyle wants to do with it. He could do the bulb method, right? He could, or even just an arch that doesn't go down so deeply. I think it's that kind of verticality of it where it literally feels like this.
Yeah.
That causes the issue, at least in my impression.
And I'm seeing here in a way that I haven't seen before. I think just the letter is standing out as slightly larger in some of these words. So there are a few things about it that I think I would like it to feel more kind of, I think a good example of like a innocent or innocuous letter in this alphabet is the lowercase q. And I'd like it to feel more like that. Right now it just feels almost like an uppercase letter when you hit it. It just stands out a little too hard.
Nice. Yeah, that Q actually is very fun, by the way. If you it's this really strong horizontal terminal treatment right there that I really like.
Yeah, very cool. Very
it speaks to its cuteness very well.
Very
Excellent.
sweet. Cool.
Jazzercise, yes.
Woo!
That's
for Frosty. Ooh, yeah. Fun. Yeah, I had to include that because, I like how you appreciated the Ragg Mopp that you were saying, okay, these diagonals. I mean, I think there were some kind of cool things happening in Ragg Mopp. I like the angle of the R, etc. I wanted to just give it a little moment to shine. But yours definitely feels like more of a compact unit, like you've been saying, you've been filling up all of this space, whereas this is, there's a lot more gappiness happening with that sort of design. Let's see, what else do we want to say? Extra frosty. Numbers. I think. Sorry. One more thing about Ragg Mopp. We didn't talk about the numerals in this typeface as much, but like to me, I mean, I think they're nice. They're kind of like cute, but I don't think they go with the typeface. Like they don't. They look
totally different
like
flavor.
a totally different thing. So that was something I think yours definitely take a little more influence from what's going on elsewhere. So I thought that worked well. Oh, there's the J again. Q. Yep. Oh, so
love
beautiful.
That Q. Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to say, Thomas.
Add in. Yeah, I mean, I'm very like I am kind of sold on that. I think maybe the degree of angle needs to be increased on the diagonal forms, but I actually like the overall impact and effect of it. It's I think very effective, especially in the all cap settings like that. I do feel like some of the numbers, like especially the 0 and his 3, especially in this context, need to be resolved a little more. I feel like actually it feels like the 0 needs more contrast or something to make it work. But yeah, I definitely, even though there's tensions and there's things to resolve in the project, I think Gooper is a very fun exploration, and it's been great to explore this with you today, Kyle.
Yeah, wow. Thanks for having me. Very revealing.
It's beautiful. Oh my God.
Weird retro fonts. Awesome. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. And Erin, always a pleasure working with you.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you so much, Kyle. Really appreciate bringing your project out here and letting us skewer it. It was very fun. And thank you to Nick's Fonts for letting us talk about Ragg Mopp.
Yes, thank you for your great contribution. And thank you to Fonts for existing. So everyone, have a great week. We have more explorations next week to continue with type designs. Don't forget, if you're working on a font and you want to join us on Fontribute, feel free to email me. It's in the doobly-doo on the bottom of the YouTube video. And I hope you all have a great week. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.